Motivational speaker who have traveled across the country over the past 25 years telling my story. But one of the joys of my life is that I get the opportunity to hear the story of millions of other people. And in that time, I have heard stories that I would define as miraculous. Now, Webster defines a miracle as something only God can do, and that God would have to break natural or earthly laws in order to do a miracle. Well, what that tells me is simply this, is that God loves people so much, he'll break the law to come and be their hero. In my journey, I've met someone that I would define as a walking, talking, living, breathing miracle. His name is Curtis Scott. And Curtis Scott's story is simply defined by saying that God broke earthly law to come and be his hero. I want to introduce you to my friend, Curtis Scott. Curtis, it's great having you with us today. Tell us a little bit about your fight, about your journey, the miracle that God has performed in the life of Curtis.
Well, August 2009, I was diagnosed with leukemia. And no one else in my family history had the disease. And only to find out that I needed a bone marrow transplant also. And so after 48 years of total good health, I was stricken with some news that really broke me. And the journey was just one negative thing after another. But in a miracle, I'm here today to talk about it.
Awesome. So tell me this. Obviously, that news had to rock your life and the life of your family. What were you doing occupation-wise? Who were you before this news came to your family? What was life like before this news even came to you? Who were you? What were you doing?
I was a construction worker. And I chose that career because it was physical. It allowed me to be outdoors. It kept me in shape, and it allowed me to make the type of money that I wanted to make for my family. Yeah. And so having good health, being outside, working long hours, I just felt like I was on the top of the world.
So at what point did things go wrong? When was the sign that something was wrong?
Well, about 2008, I started to lose weight, migraine headaches, fatigue. And so, I had a conversation with my wife, and, I said, at 48 years old, I shouldn't be feeling this way. And so when I went back to work, I was off for the whole winter. When I went back to work, I couldn't keep up with the rest of the guys. Yeah. And that was odd because I was the guy that came early. I could work the most hours and thought that I was the most physically fit. And so when my energy level plummeted, I went to the doctor, something that I had never had to do before.
So you had never been to the doctor before?
No, I was afraid of needles. I was afraid of doctors. I was afraid of, I was really fearful, but I played it off like most men do.
Okay. And when that information went from there, you got home. How did you end up back home? What transpired in regards to you and your wife receiving this information about what was happening in your body? Because obviously that was the signs, that was the beginning of it all.
Well, at this point, I had lost about 30 pounds.
Wow. And what time span?
This was probably over a 3-month period. And I was down to the weight that I wanted to be. But with fatigue associated with it. Yeah. And so I went to work, and I couldn't perform my job. And so I came home that morning, and I knew I was in trouble. So I let my wife know. I said, look, I have to call the doctor.
Yeah.
The first time I ever said that
So she knew that was unusual.
in my life.
Yeah.
She knew that was unusual, and I made an appointment. And you know, and the thing about it was, my doctor was a good friend of mine.
So how does that feel? Not only getting that information from your doctor, but this is your buddy, this is your friend sharing this information for you, with you, and then you having to turn around and share this information with your wife. Can you tell us about that moment where you received this information and now you have to turn and tell your wife what's going on?
Well, I went to the doctor. He took a blood test. He said, you get the results back in 3 days. And so I went home and I couldn't sleep. My heart was pounding. My blood pressure was high. My temperature was through the roof. I was perspiring. And the phone rings. And when I pick it up, it's my friend, the doctor. But 3 days had not passed. But what he did was he looked at my cells underneath a microscope, and it shocked him. So he called me and said, Curtis, I don't know how to tell you this, but you have leukemia. And it was not real to me. I just froze inside.
Here you are, this big, strong man, construction worker for many years, and now you've received news that your life's about to change. When you had to tell your wife that information, and you have a son.
Yes.
When you had to tell them that information, what was the impact? What were the feelings?
Well, I called my wife on her job, and I told her, and the phone went silent.
Yeah, I bet.
And so I wasn't there to see how it affected her, but she said it just really shocked her because she never knew me to be sick the whole time we were married.
Yeah.
And so we had to tell my son. He was in high school.
Yeah.
And it just traumatized the family.
Yeah. So often when these sicknesses come in, it's not only the weight of the individual who's bearing it. What you're saying is that the family also goes through a traumatizing time themselves. Was there any? How did that come about? Were you able to protect them from what you were suffering, what you were fighting at that time? Did they have to rally around you, become a part of your team in the fight? How did that work for you and your family?
I had no defense. I was in uncharted waters. I was in an area that I always dreaded. And so my family, my wife, she had to rally around me. My son, he was in the 10th grade, but he really took on being a man at that time. And I had not prepared him for that.
Yeah. So here you are. The news has come. The family knows they're in a fight. They're fighting for their husband. They're fighting for their father. Let's talk about the radiation. You go through radiation treatment. Let's talk about the journey. Now, is your body deteriorating? What's happening with you physically now in order for them to try to save your life?
Well, 70% of my cells were cancer cells.
Wow.
So I was living on 30% of my red and white blood cells. And so I needed a bone marrow transplant. So I had to have chemo first. So I had 14 days of total chemo. And so they don't give you a transplant right away. You have to find a donor. And these were things that I never realized I had to go through.
Yeah.
And so my youngest brother was the donor. And so then I got the bone marrow transplant, and that's when the fight begins. Because when you take on stem cells from another person, the white blood cells that they have that enter your body look at your body as a foreign object, and they start to attack.
So the very thing that they put in to save your life became the thing that began to attack your life to some extent.
Yes.
And it caused some complications. What complications did that bring about for you now at that point?
Well, the radiation it damaged the my eyes, the lenses in my eyes, so I had to get new lenses, transplants. My skin, they call it graft versus host disease, and it started to eat away at my skin.
Yeah.
It started to eat my lung tissue, my heart tissue,
Wow.
and my kidneys. So it took 50% of my kidney function.
Wow. And this is what they gave you to help you.
Yes. They control it with steroids. And so the damage was done.
Yeah.
So, I'm walking around with a lot of scars,
Yeah.
a lot of damage,
Yeah.
but I'm still here.
So tell me, at this point, you're going through this. I've never faced a storm like this before, personally. But there's got to be a billion things running through your mind. Here you are, a man of God, a believer. What conversations are you having as an individual with God as you're facing a storm like this?
Well, God, I trust you. I thought I had faith, but this is really challenging me. I have a lot of questions. What do you need me to do? Do you need me to pray more? Do you need me to fast more? What do you need me to do? Because now I can't provide for my family.
Yeah.
I can't pay my mortgage. I can't pay my car payment. I can't keep up the very insurance that I know is so important for my family, just in case I would leave the scene. But insurance is something that you really don't think about using.
Yeah. You got it, but it doesn't. You're not thinking about, I got it in case. At this point, then there's a lot of what you're talking about is when somebody's fighting a battle like this, the unseen things that's running through their mind, and it adds to the weight of the situation.
Well, what it does is it stops you from healing. Worry stops you from healing.
That's excellent.
And so with I was a person that worried about everything. I had to know how something was going to start, what was going to happen in the middle, and how it was going to end.
Yeah.
I was like that in every area of my life. I had to figure everything out.
Yeah.
I had to make it work, and if it didn't work that way, I would make it work the way I wanted to. Well, now I'm in a position where I can't do anything.
Yeah.
I can't make this work. And so that's when I went to God and I said, I never asked God why.
Yeah.
I just said, okay, I'm in this position and there's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
How can I help?
And that's a different mindset, because generally most people would ask God why. Most people would ask God, why is this happening to me, correct?
Correct, but reading about Job in the Bible, Job didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
God actually had a lot of faith in him and said, this guy right here, I trust him with anything that may come against him, and he will never turn against me. So I knew I couldn't turn against God.
Yeah.
See, Job didn't have the ability to read his own story, but I read Job's story.
That's good.
So I knew that I was faithful. I've been in the church my whole life. So I knew that God only wanted the best for me.
Yeah.
But this didn't look like it.
That's good. So here's your wife. At this point, she's pretty much carrying the ball. And do you see the weight of it all falling on her shoulders? What do you see happening with your wife in the midst of this storm? Because there's three different storms that turn into one. There's a storm you're going through. There's a storm she's having to face as she's having to figure out if her husband's going to be here or not. There's the storm your son's going through as he figures out what's going to happen to his father and how he's going to have to take care of his mom. Tell us a little bit about what you saw happening with your wife, what you saw happening with your son.
Well, with my wife, I saw true love.
It was beautiful.
true love, even though my body was deteriorated. I was not the man that she married, but she still treated me like I was.
Yeah.
I looked at myself and I said, this woman must really love me.
Yeah.
How can she be seen with me
Yeah.
looking like this
Oh, yeah.
and not care?
Yeah.
And that was only love. And my parents taught me about that type of love. I saw them walk it out. I saw them raise 8 kids.
Yeah.
I saw them not worry about what they were wearing or what they were driving.
Yeah.
And would take us into the stores and buy us clothes. 8 kids. And so I knew what love looked like.
Yeah.
But now I saw what love felt like. My son, he was strong, but he wasn't ready for this.
Yeah.
But I gave him full weight,
Yeah.
and he took it. And I never really saw him. I heard other people say how he interceded for me and how but in my presence he was just this strong young man that was handling it.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how he did it because I didn't prepare him for this.
Well, I'll tell you this. I met your son before I ever met you. And I met your son at a speaking engagement. And let me tell you what your son was doing. Your son was at the front of a church praying, and he was in tears, and he was praying for his father. I remember standing there and praying with your son and asked him if I could pray with him about a prayer need, and he said he was praying for his dad and that he wanted his father to live. I remember that specifically. And I remember when your son wrote a letter to our organization when we were honoring fathers, and he wrote this beautiful letter about who his dad was. And so I knew your son, and I knew what he was fighting for long before I ever met you. And when I met you, I understood what he was fighting for. He was fighting for a great man. He was fighting for a great man. What did God show you in the midst of this journey? You've got several things happening to your body in the midst of this. If I'm correct, there were things that your body began to fight even outside of the blood cells.
Well, whenever you're in the hospital for 39 days in isolation, another 21 days in isolation after the bone marrow transplant, you can develop blood clots. And so in 2011, I had, I had August 12th, 09, I had an IVC filter put in to keep the blood clots from getting to my lungs and my brain. But the very medication that I was taking caused subdural hematoma, and that's a brain bleed. And so I had a migraine headache. I went to bed, and I don't remember anything after that for 5 days.
So you have no recollection of that 5-day period?
No recollection. My brain cavity was bleeding inside, and it was putting pressure on my brain. And so I couldn't take care of my bodily functions. I was a vegetable.
Yeah.
And my wife called my mom over, and they said there's something wrong with Curtis.
Yeah.
And so they took me to U of M, and they automatically took a CAT scan and said, we have to do emergency brain surgery now. You don't have a choice in this matter. And this is during my recovery from leukemia. And here I need brain surgery. And my wife told me, she said, Curtis, the cancer was scary, but the brain surgery was really scary.
Wow.
Because now they have to do a craniotomy. And you don't know who you are. You're basically a vegetable. And nobody's really looking for you to come back from this.
So, in the midst of all of this, there's a beautiful love story between a guy and a girl who meets, who makes a promise at an altar and saying, "To death does us part." And it's easy to say that until, when we say that, we don't always think the worst part is going to come, right?
Correct.
I watched you in the midst of possibly the worst point where it looked like you were going to die. I saw the love of your wife. And I remember pulling your wife aside one day and I said, my wife and I pulled her aside and we said to your wife, hey, listen, we're praying for you guys, but we want you to know that the way you love each other is a testimony to us all on what marriages are supposed to be. And what's a beautiful thing, God was using your story and speaking to the hearts of people who are around you guys, even at that moment, and maybe you didn't even know how loudly it was speaking. What do you have to say about that?
Well, having a great family, we were blessed with one son. Me and my wife went through, loss of children. And so we know what that feels like. But we had never dealt with anything like this. And so being a man of faith, God just let me know, look, this is happening for a reason.
Yeah.
I have you in my hand. I'm holding you in my hand. And you kept asking me, what did you need to do? Well, now I'm going to let you know. And God spoke to me through dreams and scripture to let the congregation at my church see me walk through this situation back to health. And so I came when I couldn't stand. I came when I had staples in my head. I came when I had lost 80 pounds. I came when my color had changed. I came. And the nurses at the church said, you should not be here. But I said, but God told me. Because it's going to have to be a story to tell. And people need their faith increased. And he wanted to use me to do it. And so that's why I came, even when I had to be held up at the altar, to let people see what God was getting ready to do.
And I tell you what, it was a testimony to anyone who knew you, and a light that was shining in a dark place, and a beautiful thing to see what God was. I think anybody who knew you hated to see you in the situation, and if anybody could come and jump in and rescue you, they possibly would have. But at the same time, what was amazing was to see how God was using your life to speak to so many of us at that time as well too, about the importance of life and relationships and destiny and purpose. And then to watch him do what? The comeback kid. Here you are. What you just told us, you don't look like that because you had some issues with your bones as well, hips and things like that. Tell us about that as well.
Well, with the construction career that I was in, I did a lot of heavy lifting and things like that. And it actually strengthened my bones. But the steroids that I was taking, I had to stay on them a long time. And so they deteriorated my hip joints. So both my hip joints were totally gone. I have one total hip replacement now, and I'm waiting to get the second one. But, I don't limp. And that's only because God, and just being a physical guy, I was able to not look like what I've been through.
There you go. Yeah, because you don't. You don't look like what you've been through at all. It's a miracle to see you come back from the door literally of death at one point, and to be standing here. Curtis, in the wilderness, there's a specific tree or specific pine cone that has some incredible potential inside of it, but it can only come out at high temperatures. And not even the sun can cause this pine cone to open up. It only comes out when a forest fire hits. And when that forest fire hits, that specific pine cone then opens up. And the seeds that pine cone releases becomes the seeds for the new forest that grows up. And so it's almost like God prepared it, and like only fire could release the potential inside that pine cone. You've been through the fire, and that fire has released something in you that has birthed a new forest. Tell us what you're doing now. Since you've been through that fire, you're doing some really neat things now. Some doors are opening up for you to tell your story to others.
Well, the ability that I have now is to have compassion for people that are suffering,
Yeah,
to give hope to people that don't have any hope,
yeah,
to really understand what my purpose really is now. And so now I'm attracted to everything that I was afraid of before. I'm attracted to hospitals. I'm attracted to people with cancer. I'm attracted to people that don't have any hope.
yeah,
And so now I can speak from a different perspective.
yeah.
And God really allowed me to see myself in other people. And so I can recognize when people are really going through and where they are, and just give them some hope, and tell them, I've been there.
That's right.
I've been there, and I'm the one that came back.
There you go. I love it. I love it. So, Curtis, what is it that you would say to those of us who we don't know? We haven't been in those shoes. We haven't faced those types of depths in life. We haven't faced cancer. We haven't, what is it that we don't know about maybe our loved ones who are going through that type of a fire? What is it that, on behalf of those people, you could tell us so that we could do a better job at being there for them and loving them through whatever it is they're going through at that time? What is it that we don't know that you can speak from?
Well, one thing I know is you have to have patience. The person that's going through, they don't want to be in that situation.
Yeah,
And sometimes they can be a little irritable
yeah,
because they feel hopeless.
yeah,
Men especially that can't provide for their family, they have a lot of things going through their minds. Fear.
yeah.
Everything ends with fear. Financial fear.
Yeah.
Health fear. Emotional fear. And so you have to understand that they don't want to be that way. They don't want to be there. So patience is huge. Just allow that love that you have to give you some patience to deal with somebody that's going through.
What would you say to the person who right now might be facing the greatest challenge of their life? And pain comes in many different forms, is one of the comments that you always say. So it may be somebody who's laying in a bedroom, laying in a hospital bed right now, who's facing their greatest challenge. It may be someone who's sitting on their couch right now. Physically, they're perfectly healthy, but other means and otherwise, they're facing their greatest challenge right now. You know what it is to be in the corner and fight your way out. What would you say to that person who feels like they're losing right now?
Well, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, it's still pain. And so what I would say is go back to that faith that you have.
Yeah.
And the Bible tells us that we all have a measure of faith.
Yeah.
But all you need is the faith the size of a mustard seed.
Yeah.
So go back to your faith and just meditate and ask God. Say, God, what do you need me to learn through this?
Yeah.
What direction do you need me to go in this situation? Because he said he'd never leave you or forsake you.
Yeah.
So God is with you. Make sure you pray with your family, your kids, your wife. The word says where 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, he's in the midst.
Yeah.
And if he's in the midst, you can ask him for what you want.
There you go.
And God will speak to you. He will let you know. He will comfort you. And so everything positive comes from God. He has no negativity that is attached to him.
Yeah.
So you're going to hear some voices.
Yeah.
You're going to hear some negative voices. Just pull the plug. Pull the IV out. I heard all of those.
Yeah.
if you just pull that IV out, it'll be over in 5 days. But that's not what God is telling us.
Yeah.
God is telling us to have faith in Him, trust Him. And when it looks the worst, that's when you know that you're getting ready to come over on the other side.
Beautiful, beautiful. Curtis, as we begin to wrap up here, the financial side of this thing, when someone gets that sick, can turn into a monster and add to the worry, as you talked about. I would imagine you had to financially, you had to be facing a mountain of medical bills going through what you went through. What did the numbers look like in that, and what did that do to you mentally?
Well, every day that you're a transplant patient, you're in intensive care. 24 hours.
Yeah.
Every 15 minutes they monitor you. So that bill can get up to $1 million very quick.
Wow.
And some people don't have insurance at all.
Yeah.
And even with good insurance, it can still ruin you.
Yeah.
And so that's when your family, and I have a great family.
Yeah.
That's when my family came in and said, we will bear the burden of every last one of your bills until you can get back on your feet. Now, everyone doesn't have that, but God put me in a situation where I could not take care of anything, but my family took care of everything.
That's beautiful. So at the end of the day, what we learn is that from your life, this is what I hear. I hear two things. I hear that most of us aren't fool enough to be storm chasers, because nobody wants to be in a storm.
Correct.
But all of us need to learn how to be storm embracers, because there's something to be learned in every storm. And sometimes God calms the storm, and sometimes God calms His child. And for you, your story is God calmed His child while He went through the storm. We want to thank you for sharing your story. Is there anything before we leave here that you want to say to the world who will have an opportunity to hear the story of Curtis Scott?
Well, it doesn't matter where you start. I was born on Genesee Street Bridge in the back of a car. I was separated from the rest of the kids. I was number 7 child out of 8. I never knew what was special about me, but God had a plan for me.
That's right.
And His plan was to take me through a journey that I could allow people to watch me go through.
Yeah.
Most people don't want you to see them at their worst point.
That's right.
But if you have enough faith in God to allow Him to use you in your situation, then you won't worry about how you look. You won't worry about how you feel. Now, this is all faith, and I had none of this. I have obtained this after going through, but it was going from fear to faith, and I'm on the faith side now. So anyone out there that is going through, just know that God has a plan for you, and if you just trust Him, He'll walk you through it.
That's right.
And so I'm here only because I trusted God. And that's all I had. I didn't have anything else.
Curtis, I want to thank you for sharing your story. You're traveling now. You're speaking. You're sharing your story with people in many different sectors, corporate, churches, whatever the case may be. We thank you for being brave enough to do that and giving us hope, so that as we face our storms, that we know that, hey, if God came through for Curtis Scott, God will come through for me, because the truth is this. Every one of us, we're either entering into a storm, we're in a storm right now, or we're just coming out of the storm. So we better learn how to navigate them. So we want to thank you for sharing your story and giving us some tools to weather life storms. God bless you, my friend.
Thank you.
Yeah.